The passport made a sickening rip that echoed through the silent terminal. It wasn't just paper tearing. It was the sound of a career ending. Kyle, the gate agent, smirked as he tossed the mangled booklet back at the woman, thinking he'd just put an entitled passenger in her place. He thought she was powerless. He thought she was nobody. But he was wrong. Dead wrong. The woman standing before him wasn't just a traveler. She was Sarah Mitchell, a senior FAA inspector on a covert audit. And Kyle had just committed a federal felony in front of the one person with the power to take everything from him. This is the story of arrogance meeting absolute authority. The fluorescent lights of Chicago O'Hare's Terminal 3 hummed with a frequency that usually induced headaches in the weary. But for Sarah Mitchell, it was simply the background noise of her office. Sarah adjusted the strap of her modest, worn leather tote bag and checked her watch. 8:45 a.m. Flight 492 to Denver was scheduled for boarding in 20 minutes. To the casual observer, and specifically to the staff of Aerosky Airlines, Sarah looked like anything but a threat. She was a black woman in her mid-40s, dressed in comfortable travel sweats, a denim jacket and sneakers. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and she projected the air of an exhausted mother, perhaps flying to visit relatives. This was by design. In her line of work, invisibility was the sharpest weapon. Sarah was a senior aviation safety inspector for the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. Her badge number, 8492-Bravo, was tucked deep inside the hidden pocket of her bag next to a startlingly heavy government-issued tablet that contained the safety records of every carrier in the United States. Today she wasn't Sarah the passenger. She was Agent Mitchell conducting a re-examination audit on Aerosky's ground operations, following a series of anonymous whistleblower complaints regarding discriminatory profiling and safety protocol bypasses at Gate K-12. The complaints were specific. They named a lead gate agent Kyle Vane. Sarah approached the podium. The gate area was chaotic, a churning sea of frustrated travelers. An unexpected snowstorm in the Rockies had delayed incoming aircraft, and the tension in the waiting area was thick enough to choke on. At the center of the storm stood Kyle Vane. Kyle was a man who wore his polyester uniform like a suit of armor. Tall with gelled blonde hair and a jawline that he clenched perpetually, he moved with the frantic, jerky energy of someone who thrived on petty authority. He was currently berating a young couple whose carry-on bag was perhaps half an inch too wide. "I don't care what the sizer says at the check-in desk," Kyle snapped, his voice projecting so the whole gate could hear. "This is my gate, and at my gate that bag is checked. $50, card only, now or you don't fly." The young man tried to argue, but his partner pulled his arm, whispering something about just paying it. Kyle tapped his fingers on the counter, rolling his eyes dramatically for the benefit of his co-worker, a younger woman named Jessica, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Sarah hung back, observing. This was the first part of the audit observation of pre-boarding temperament and adherence to the contract of carriage. So far, Kyle was rude, but not illegal. Being a jerk wasn't a violation of federal aviation regulations, though it certainly didn't help safety culture. Sarah waited until the couple moved aside, defeated, before stepping up to the counter. She needed to verify a seat change, a standard request, but one she often used to test agent patience and procedure. "Excuse me," Sarah said, her voice soft, intentionally diffident. Kyle didn't look up. He was typing furiously on his terminal, though the screen reflection in the plexiglass showed he was merely scrolling through a seating chart he had already opened. "Excuse me, sir," Sarah repeated a little louder. Kyle held up a finger, still not looking at her. "Wait." Sarah waited. She counted the seconds. 10, 20, 45. It was a power move, a classic dominance tactic used by insecure officials to establish hierarchy. Finally, Kyle sighed a long, exaggerated exhalation of breath and looked at her. His eyes scanned her attire, lingering on the fraying cuff of her denim jacket. The dismissal in his eyes was instant. "What?" he asked. Not, "How can I help you?" Just what? "I'm in seat 34B, Sarah said, holding out her boarding pass. "I have a tight connection in Denver. I was hoping to see if there was an aisle seat available, closer to the front. I see on the app that 12C is open." Kyle scoffed a short, sharp sound. "The app isn't the gate agent, is it? I am." "I understand," Sarah said, keeping her tone level. "I'm just asking if it's possible to switch." "Zone 4 passengers don't get upgrades," Kyle said, turning back to his screen. "It's not an upgrade," Sarah corrected gently. "It's the same economy class, just a different seat assignment." Kyle stopped typing. He turned his whole body toward her, leaning over the counter. The air around them seemed to drop a few degrees. "Look, lady, I have 200 people trying to get to Denver. I have a delayed crew. I have a headache. And I really don't have time for someone who bought a basic economy ticket to beg for favors. Sit in 34B or don't go. Your choice." Sarah mentally noted the aggression. Still, technically he could deny the seat change, but the aggression was a red flag. Safety relies on communication. An agent who shuts down communication creates risk. "I appreciate the stress," Sarah said, "but there's no need to speak to me that way. I'm a paying customer." "You're a disruption," Kyle shot back. "And if you keep talking, I'll mark you as one." There it was, the threat. Sarah reached into her bag. "I'd like to speak to a supervisor, please, or the red coat if they are available." The color in Kyle's face shifted from pale to a splotchy red. He laughed, a cruel, incredulous sound. "You want a supervisor for a seat change?" "No," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the diffident tremor. "For your conduct." Kyle's eyes narrowed. He looked at Jessica, the other agent. "Can you believe this?" Then he looked back at Sarah. "Let me see your ID and boarding pass again." Sarah hesitated. She knew where this was going. It was a retaliation tactic. Find a technicality. Any technicality to deny boarding. "My ID was checked at TSA," Sarah said. "And now it's being checked by Aerosky," Kyle said, extending his hand. "Passport, now." Sarah handed over her passport. It was her personal one, not her diplomatic government one. She needed to maintain cover until the violation was undeniable. It was a standard US passport, valid for another 5 years. It was in pristine condition, save for the usual wear of a frequent flyer. Kyle took the blue booklet. He didn't open it immediately. He held it by the corner, like it was contaminated. He looked at Sarah, then down at the document. "This looks flimsy," he muttered. "It's a standard-issue passport," Sarah said. Kyle flipped it open. He scanned the photo page. He looked at Sarah's face, then back at the photo. The photo was 3 years old. Her hair was different, braided then in a bun now. "This isn't you," Kyle stated flatly. Sarah blinked. "Excuse me. That is absolutely me. I'm Sarah Mitchell. Hair's different. Nose looks different." Kyle squinted, performing a theatrical inspection for the benefit of the line forming behind Sarah. And the lamination here. It's peeling." "It is not peeling," Sarah said firmly. "I flew internationally 2 weeks ago. It scanned perfectly." "Well, our standards are higher than wherever you came from," Kyle sneered. The racial coding in the comment hung in the air, heavy and toxic. A woman behind Sarah gasped. A man in a suit, standing near the priority lane, looked up from his phone, frowning. "Give me my passport back," Sarah said. "If you have a doubt, call a supervisor or the TSA immediately. You are not a forensic document expert." "I'm the gate lead," Kyle said, his voice rising, "and I say this document is suspicious. And do you know what we do with suspicious documents?" "Kyle, don't," Jessica whispered from her station. "Just board her." "Quiet, Jess," Kyle snapped. He looked Sarah dead in the eye. A wicked, impulsive idea seemed to cross his mind, a desire to exert total physical control over this woman who dared to ask for his manager. "We can't let fraudulent documents stay in circulation. It's a security risk." "Do not," Sarah warned, her voice suddenly icy, possessed of a command presence that made the businessman in the suit stand up straighter. "Do not damage that document." Kyle smiled. It was a smile devoid of joy. "Oops," he whispered. The sound was distinct. "Ripe." It wasn't a small tear. Kyle had grabbed the laminated data page, the page containing the biometric chip, the photograph, and the watermarks, and bent it backward with force, torquing it against the binding until the stitching gave way, and the laminate cracked down the center of the photo. The gate area went silent. Sarah stood frozen. In her 20 years with the FAA, encompassing fieldwork in hostile regions and contentious audits with bankrupt airlines, she had never seen a gate agent physically destroy a passenger's passport. It was so egregious, so incredibly illegal, that her brain took a microsecond to process the reality of it. Kyle tossed the passport onto the counter. It landed splayed open, the photo of Sarah, now bisected by a jagged white crease, the integrity of the document completely ruined. "There," Kyle said, wiping his hands on his pants as if cleaning them of dirt. "Now it's void. You're not flying anywhere today, Miss Mitchell. You can go down to customer service and rebook once you have valid ID. Next." He tried to look past her to the next passenger, but nobody moved. "You." Sarah's voice was low. She wasn't shouting. She was vibrating with a terrifying calm. "You just committed a federal felony." Kyle laughed. "I confiscated a fraudulent document. I'm doing my job." "Security." He waved his hand toward the TSA checkpoint down the hall. "We've got an unruly passenger here." "You didn't confiscate it," Sarah said, picking up the ruined passport. She held it up, showing the damage to the crowd. "You destroyed it. This is government property." "It's my airline's property, while you're at my gate," Kyle shouted, losing his composure as he realized the line wasn't siding with him. "You were aggressive. You threatened me." "I did no such thing," Sarah said. She turned to the crowd. "Did anyone hear me threaten him?" "Hell no," said the businessman in the suit. He stepped forward. His name was David Thorne, a frequent flyer who knew the rules almost as well as the staff. "I've been standing here for 10 minutes. She asked for a seat change. You were the one escalating it, buddy." "Stay out of this." Kyle pointed a shaking finger at David. "Or you're off the flight, too." "You're going to kick us all off?" a woman with a baby carrier asked from the line. "She didn't do anything. You just ripped her passport up." Kyle's face flushed a deep, alarming purple. He slammed his hand on the counter. "I'm in charge here. This is a secure area. If you people don't back up, I'm clearing the entire gate." He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is gate K1-2. I have a code red. Unruly mob. Multiple passengers refusing instructions. Send airport police. Now. Jessica, the junior agent, was shaking. Kyle, you can't. You shouldn't have torn it. Shut up, Kyle hissed at her. Back me up, or I'll write you up for insubordination. She threw it at me, got it. She threw it, and it ripped. Sarah pulled out her phone. She didn't record Kyle. She didn't need to. The cameras above Gate K-12 were high-definition audio-enabled and fed directly to the Airport Operations Center. She knew this because she had inspected them 3 months ago. Instead, she dialed a number. Not the police. Not the airline customer service. She dialed the direct line of the Federal Security Director, FSD, for O'Hare, a man named Marcus Vance, and the Regional Director of the FAA, Linda Grayson. But before she could hit send, 2 airport police officers arrived, jogging down the concourse. "Step back, everyone, step back." The lead officer, a burly man named Officer Miller, put his hand on his belt. He looked at the scene, a tall, agitated white man in a uniform behind the counter, and a black woman standing calmly in front of it, holding a torn booklet. Bias is a fast-acting poison. Officer Miller saw the uniform and assumed authority. He saw the passenger and assumed the problem. "Ma'am, step away from the counter," Miller commanded, moving into Sarah's personal space. "Officer," Sarah said calmly, "I am the victim of a crime here. This agent just destroyed my U.S. passport." "She's lying," Kyle shouted, playing the victim with practiced ease. "She tried to force her way onto the jet bridge. She attacked me. The passport ripped when I tried to stop her." "That is a lie," David the businessman shouted. "He ripped it on purpose. We all saw it." "Sir, back up." The second officer pushed David back. Miller focused on Sarah. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands where I can see them. You are being detained for disturbing the peace and interfering with a flight crew." "Officer," Sarah said, her hands clearly visible, "I am complying, but I strongly suggest you do not touch me until you review the security footage, and I need you to call your supervisor." "I don't need a supervisor to handle a disruptive passenger," Miller snapped. He pulled out handcuffs. "Turn around." Kyle smirked. He crossed his arms, leaning back against the Aerosky logo. He had won. He had summoned the guns, and the guns were pointing at the woman who dared to question him. He felt the rush of adrenaline that comes with unchecked power. He watched as the officer grabbed Sarah's wrist. Sarah didn't resist. She allowed herself to be cuffed. It was part of the evidence chain now. Every second of this humiliation was adding zeros to the fines Aerosky was about to face. "You're making a mistake," Sarah whispered to Officer Miller as the cold steel clicked shut. "A career-ending mistake." "I'll take my chances," Miller grunted. "Let's go. We're taking a walk to the holding room." As they led Sarah away, Kyle called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Have a nice day, ma'am. Maybe next time you'll respect the people in charge." He turned back to the line, clapping his hands. "All right, folks. Show's over. Who's next?" But the show wasn't over. It was just the intermission. The holding room at the O'Hare Airport Police Substation smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner. It was a stark, windowless box, painted a depressing shade of beige, designed to suck the fight out of drunks and unruly travelers. Sarah sat on a metal bench, her hands still cuffed behind her back. The steel bit into her wrists, but she sat with a spinal alignment that suggested a boardroom, not a jail cell. Officer Miller sat at a desk opposite her, pecking at a keyboard with 2 fingers. He was humming a tune, clearly pleased with himself. He had secured the perimeter. He had backed the authority figure, Kyle. In his mind, the paperwork was just a formality before they released her with a court summons and a permanent ban from Aerosky. "Name?" Miller asked, not looking up. "Sarah Mitchell," she replied calmly. "Occupation? Federal civil servant." Miller snorted. "Postal worker, DMV. You guys always think that gives you a pass to act up." He typed something. "Current address?" "I'm not answering further questions until I am allowed to access my personal effects," Sarah said. "Specifically, the inner pocket of my tote bag. I need to retrieve my official identification. The passport Mr. Vane destroyed was my personal travel document. My government credentials are in the bag." Miller stopped typing. He spun his chair around. "You're really sticking to this story, huh? You want me to dig through your bag so you can show me a library card?" "I am requesting you verify my identity," Sarah said. "As is my right, and frankly, officer, as is your duty before you process a federal employee." Miller rolled his eyes. He stood up, walked over to the evidence table where Sarah's worn leather tote sat. "Fine, let's see what we got. Maybe some knitting needles. A cat toy." He grabbed the bag and upended it onto the table. A water bottle tumbled out, a paperback book, a scarf, and then with a heavy thud, the FAA issued Surface Pro tablet in its ruggedized case. Next to it slid a black leather wallet with a gold emblem embossed on the front. Miller paused. The emblem wasn't a fashion logo. It was the Department of Transportation seal. He reached out and flipped the wallet open. The blood drained from Officer Miller's face so fast it looked like a gravity failure. Inside was a silver shield, polished and gleaming. Below it was a photo ID, Sarah Mitchell, Senior Aviation Safety Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration, clearance level top secret. Miller looked at the badge, then at Sarah, then back at the badge. The air in the room seemed to vanish. He realized with a sinking horror that the woman he had handcuffed, the woman he had manhandled through the terminal, while she warned him he was making a mistake, outranked his boss. In fact, she outranked the airport management. In the hierarchy of aviation safety, she was the voice of God. "Oh," Miller whispered. It was a small, fragile sound. He dropped the badge as if it were red hot. He scrambled for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't get the key into the handcuff lock on the first try. "Ma'am." "Ms. Mitchell, I didn't know." Miller stammered, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "The agent, he said you were—" "Stop!" Sarah commanded. She didn't move her arms even as the cuffs clicked open. She rubbed her wrists slowly, looking at the red marks left behind. "Do not apologize to me, Officer Miller. You failed to investigate. You blindly accepted the narrative of a biased accuser because of the uniform he wore and the way I look. You violated due process." "I can fix this," Miller said, backing away, looking for a phone. "I'll call the chief. We can drop the charges right now. You can go catch your flight." Sarah stood up. She picked up her badge and hung it around her neck. The transformation was absolute. The exhausted traveler was gone. The inspector was here. "Drop the charges." Sarah laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Officer Miller, I am not going anywhere. You are going to make a phone call, but not to your chief. You are going to call the Federal Security Director, Marcus Vance. Then you are going to call the Aerosky station manager, and you are going to tell them that an FAA inspector is currently in police custody after being assaulted by a gate lead, and that she has initiated a Code 12 emergency audit of this entire terminal. Code 12, Miller choked out. It means total shutdown, Sarah said. Nobody leaves, nobody takes off, until I say so. Miller stared at her, paralyzed. Make the call, Sarah barked. Now. Back at gate K12, the atmosphere had shifted from frustrated to volatile. Kyle Vane was trying to board Group 3, but the line wasn't moving. David Thorne, the businessman in the suit, was standing directly next to the podium. He hadn't boarded. In fact, he had stepped out of the line entirely. He held his phone up, recording everything. Sir, I told you. Kyle snapped, sweating slightly now. Get on the plane or stay here. I don't care. But stop filming me. I'm exercising my First Amendment rights in a public spoil, David said calmly, and I'm waiting for the police to come back with that woman. She's in jail, Kyle sneered, scanning a boarding pass of a confused teenager. Where she belongs, criminals don't fly Aerosky. She asked for a seat change, a woman shouted from the seating area. That's not a crime. She had a fake passport, Kyle yelled back, losing his professional veneer entirely. It was peeling, it was trash. It looked fine to me, someone else yelled. Jessica, the junior agent, was weeping silently at her computer. She knew what she had seen. She knew Kyle had bent the document until it snapped. She typed a message to the internal union rep chat on her screen, her fingers trembling. Kyle just ripped a PAX passport. Police took her. I think he's lying. I'm scared. Suddenly a chime echoed through the terminal. But it wasn't a boarding announcement. It was the distinct triple-tone chime of the flight deck calling the gate. Kyle grabbed the phone. Yeah, we're boarding. We're a little behind. This is Captain Anderson. A deep voice boomed loud enough that David could hear it leaking from the earpiece. I'm looking at the manifest. Why do we have a denied boarding full security risk for a Sarah Mitchell? And why is my head flight attendant telling me passengers are saying you assaulted someone? It's under control, Cap. Kyle lied, his voice rising an octave. Just a unruly PAX. Police handled it. Well, unhandle it, the captain said, because I just got a text from my union rep saying the FAA just flagged this flight number. What did you do, Kyle? I didn't do anything. Kyle slammed the phone down. He looked at the crowd. They were hostile, a sea of angry faces. And then he saw it. David turned his phone screen toward Kyle. Your viral buddy. Kyle squinted. On the screen was a video uploaded 5 minutes ago to Twitter and TikTok. The caption read, Power Trip, Aerosky agent destroys black woman's passport for no reason. Hashtag Aerosky, hashtag racist, hashtag O'Hare. The video showed the clear arc of the passport flying through the air, Kyle's smirk, and the distinct sound of the rip. It already had 50,000 views. Take that down, Kyle demanded, coming around the counter. Don't touch me, David shouted. Touch me and I'll sue you for everything you've got. At that moment, the walkie-talkie on Kyle's belt, the one connected to the main operations center, screamed to life. It wasn't the usual chatter. It was the all-call emergency channel. Attention all stations. Attention all stations. Stop boarding immediately. Repeat. Stop boarding. Ground, stop in effect for Terminal 3. All gate leads report to your podiums and await instructions from the FSD. This is not a drill. Kyle froze. A ground stop. For the whole terminal that only happened during bomb threats or massive weather events. He looked out the window. The sky was clear. What is going on? Jessica whispered. Kyle's stomach dropped. He looked at the empty jet bridge door where Sarah had been led away. A creeping, cold sensation started at the base of his spine. Who was she? The passengers began to murmur. Ground stop. Why? Then the crowd parted. Walking down the center of the concourse wasn't just the airport police. It was a phalanx of suits. Leading the pack was Marcus Vance, the federal security director. He was a mountain of a man, known for eating incompetent managers for breakfast. Next to him was the station manager for Aerosky, a woman named Brenda, who looked like she was about to vomit. And walking between them, no longer in handcuffs, wearing her badge like a shield of invincible armor, was Sarah Mitchell. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked like the angel of death. The silence that fell over Gate K-12 was heavy, thick with anticipation. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of hard-soled shoes on the terrazzo floor. Kyle Vane stood behind his podium. His mouth went dry. He recognized Marcus Vance. Everyone knew the FSD, but he didn't understand why Vance was walking with the prisoner. Maybe she was being transferred to the FBI. Yes, that had to be it. She was a major criminal. A spy. He had caught a spy. He puffed his chest out. He fixed his tie. He prepared his hero face. The group stopped 10 feet from the counter. Officer Miller was trailing behind them, looking at his boots. "Director Vance," Kyle said, his voice projecting confident authority. "I'm glad you're here. The situation has been contained, but the crowd is being difficult. This passenger—" "Quiet," Marcus Vance said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The word cracked like a whip. Kyle blinked. "Sir." Vance turned to Sarah. "Inspector Mitchell, is this the individual?" Sarah stepped forward. She held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside lay her ruined passport, split down the middle. "That is him, Director," Sarah said calmly. "Kyle Vane, lead gate agent." Kyle's brain short-circuited. "Inspector, Inspector?" Kyle laughed nervously. "Wait, is this a joke? She's a passenger. She's nobody. She had a fake ID." "Mr. Vane," the Aerosky station manager. Brenda stepped in. Her voice was trembling with suppressed rage. "You are speaking to a senior FAA aviation safety inspector, and you have just grounded 30 flights because you decided to destroy federal property." Kyle felt the blood leave his extremities. The world started to spin slightly. FAA number, no. She was in sweatpants. She didn't identify herself. "I attempted to," Sarah cut in, her voice slicing through his excuses. "I asked for a supervisor. You refused. I warned you that destroying the document was a felony. You laughed. I told you that you were making a career-ending mistake. You mocked me." Sarah walked up to the counter. She placed her hands on the surface, the same surface Kyle had slammed an hour ago. "Kyle Vane," Sarah said, "pursuant to U.S. Code. Title: 18, Section 1361, Destruction of Government Property, and Title 49, Section 46,500, 3, Interference with Federal Aviation Safety Duties. I am hereby revoking your SIDR badge." She held out her hand. "Give it to me." "You can't," Kyle stammered. "I have a union. You can't just take my badge." "I am the FAA," Sarah said. "I can ground this airline if I find cause. Taking your badge is the least of what I can do. Hand it over, now, or Officer Miller will take it from you, and this time he'll use the handcuffs on the right person." Kyle looked at Miller. Miller looked away, refusing to make eye contact. Kyle looked at Jessica. Jessica was staring at her shoes, distancing herself from the blast radius. Kyle looked at the passengers. David Thorne was zooming in with his phone. The entire gate was watching. With shaking hands, Kyle reached up to his lanyard. He unclipped the plastic ID card that gave him access to the secure areas. The card that gave him his power, his identity, his reason for being arrogant. He placed it in Sarah's hand. "You are relieved of duty," Sarah said. She turned to Brenda. "Manager, I want this man escorted out of the secure area immediately. He is no longer authorized to be airside." "Yes, Inspector," Brenda said instantly. "Miller, escort Mr. Vane to the curb." "Wait," Kyle pleaded, panic setting in. "I didn't know if I knew she was FAA. I wouldn't have done it. It was a mistake." "That," Sarah said, leaning in close so only Kyle could hear the steel in her voice, "is exactly the problem, Mr. Vane. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was powerless. If you only treat people with respect when you fear their rank, you have no business working in safety, or with the public." "Get him out of here," Vance barked. Officer Miller stepped forward, grabbing Kyle's arm, with significantly less gentleness than he had used on Sarah. "Let's go, Kyle." As Kyle was led away protesting and crying, the gate area erupted. It wasn't a riot. It was applause. David Thorne started it. Then the woman with the baby. Then the businessman. A slow, rolling thunder of clapping hands. Sarah didn't smile. She didn't wave. She turned to Jessica, the young agent who was now trembling behind the counter. "What is your name?" Sarah asked gently. "Jessica, ma'am," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to stop him." "I know," Sarah said. "I saw you trying. Now, Jessica, we have a plane to board, and I still need to get to Denver. Can you please check if seat 12C is available?" Jessica typed furiously. Yes, ma'am, I'm assigning it to you now, and I'm upgrading you to first class. On us." "That won't be necessary," Sarah said, turning back to the crowd. "But I will take the aisle seat." However, the story wasn't over. Kyle was gone, but the audit was just beginning, and Aerosky was about to learn that ripping up a passport costs a lot more than the price of the paper. The immediate aftermath of the incident at Gate K-12 was not a ripple. It was a tsunami. While Sarah Mitchell boarded her flight to Denver, seated in 12C, where she spent the duration of the flight typing a preliminary report that would scorch the earth, Kyle Vane was beginning a descent into a hell of his own making. The hard karma wasn't just losing a job. It was the systematic dismantling of a life built on unearned arrogance. The corporate bloodbath. 3 days later, the headquarters of Aerosky in Dallas was in full crisis mode. The video David Thorne had recorded didn't just go viral. It became a global symbol of corporate abuse. It had 45 million views in 72 hours. The hashtag ripped passport was trending higher than the Super Bowl. In the mahogany-paneled boardroom on the 40th floor, CEO Richard Sterling stared out the window. The company's stock had dipped 8% since Tuesday. That was a loss of $400 million in market cap, all because a gate lead decided to play God. "The FAA isn't just fining us, Richard," said Amanda Clark, the airline's general counsel. She threw a thick stack of papers onto the table. "They are launching a Level 1 system-wide audit. Sarah Mitchell wasn't just an inspector. She is the regional director's top auditor. She has flagged us for systemic failure to comply with passenger civil rights and willful destruction of federal property. Do you know what the fine is for the passport alone?" "I don't care about the fine," Sterling snapped. "Pay it." "It's not just the money," Amanda pressed her voice sharp. "The Department of Transportation is reviewing our operating certificate for O'Hare. They are threatening to pull our slots. If we lose the O'Hare slots, we lose the Midwest." Sterling turned around, his face pale. Because of one gate agent. Because that agent acted with impunity under a management culture that encouraged speed over service, Amanda corrected. Mitchell's report details 7 previous complaints against Kyle Vane that we ignored. We didn't just employ a loose cannon. We loaded him and pointed him at the passengers. The FAA has us dead to rights. Kyle's personal hell. While the executives scrambled to save the company, Kyle Vane was sitting in a small, sterile interrogation room at the FBI field office in Chicago. He wasn't being treated like a rude employee. He was being processed as a federal criminal. "I told you," Kyle said, his voice cracking. He looked smaller now, stripped of his uniform, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt. "It was an accident. I tried to grab it and it tore." Special Agent Thomas Halloway didn't blink. He pressed a button on a laptop. The video played. "RIP. The forensic document analysis confirms torque was applied." Halloway said, his tone conversational but deadly. "You didn't pull it. You bent it. That is willful destruction of government property, Title 18 U.S. Code. Punishment includes fines and up to 1 year in prison. Plus we have the charge of interfering with a federal safety inspector." "I didn't know she was an inspector," Kyle cried out. "That's entrapment. Ignorance of the victim's status is not a defense for assault or property destruction," Halloway said. "And frankly, Mr. Vane, the fact that you did this to a civilian thinking she was nobody makes it worse in the eyes of the jury. You targeted her because of her race and her gender, assuming she wouldn't fight back. That adds a civil rights enhancement to the charges." Kyle put his head in his hands. "I just want to go home. I've been fired. Isn't that enough?" "You haven't just been fired," Halloway said, sliding a paper across the desk. "The TSA has placed you on the Do Not Fly list pending the investigation. You are blacklisted from holding any position that requires SIDA clearance at any airport in the United States. You will never work in aviation again, not even sweeping the floors." Kyle stared at the paper. Aviation was the only industry he knew. He had spent 10 years climbing the ladder, stepping on people to get to the top. Now the ladder was gone, and he was falling into a void. The civil suit. 2 weeks later, Sarah Mitchell filed a civil lawsuit. She didn't hire a billboard lawyer. She hired a top-tier civil rights firm in D.C. The lawsuit Mitchell versus Aerosky and Vane didn't ask for a quick settlement. It demanded a public trial. Sarah wanted everything on the record. During the deposition, Kyle had to sit across from Sarah. He looked haggard. He had lost weight. He couldn't make eye contact. "Mr. Vane," Sarah's lawyer asked, "why did you assume Miss Mitchell's passport was fake? Was it the quality of the laminate, or was it the fact that you didn't believe a black woman in sweatpants could travel internationally?" "I was just being vigilant," Kyle mumbled. "Vigilant?" The lawyer played the video again. "You were smiling, Mr. Vane. You smiled when you ripped it. Is that vigilance, or is that sadism?" Kyle broke. He started crying in the deposition. "I was stressed. The flight was delayed. I just wanted her to listen to me." "So you demanded submission?" Sarah spoke up. It was the first time. She had spoken in the room. "You didn't want compliance, Kyle. You wanted submission. And when I answered you as an equal, you decided to destroy me." The settlement came 3 days later. Aerosky paid Sarah an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the mid-7 figures. But the money wasn't the point. Part of the settlement required Aerosky to implement the Mitchell Protocol, a mandatory recurrent training program on bias and de-escalation for all 45,000 employees monitored personally by the FAA. 1 year later, the winter winds off Lake Michigan had turned Chicago into a frozen fortress. But inside O'Hare's Terminal 3, the ecosystem was humming with a warmth that felt entirely new. It had been exactly 12 months since the incident at Gate K-12, a phrase now taught in aviation management courses across the country as a cautionary tale of catastrophic leadership failure. Sarah Mitchell walked through the sliding glass doors of the departure level, a blast of heated air greeting her. She stomped the snow off her boots. She wasn't traveling undercover today. She was dressed in a sharp navy blazer, a white blouse, and dark slacks, her FAA credentials hanging openly around her neck. The lanyard was no longer just an ID. For many in the industry, seeing Inspector Mitchell was akin to seeing a celebrity, or perhaps a warning flare, depending on how closely one followed the rules. She was headed to Washington, D.C. for the annual Aviation Safety and Civil Rights Summit. She was the keynote speaker. Her topic: the cost of dignity, how service culture impacts safety protocols. As she moved through the concourse, Sarah noticed the changes. They were subtle to the untrained eye, but glaring to an inspector. The signage was clearer, less aggressive. The carry-on sizer boxes, once used as weapons of humiliation, now had helpful graphics explaining how to pack efficiently. But the biggest change was the noise level. The shouting was gone. The chaotic barking of orders that used to define the gate areas had been replaced by a more measured professional tone. Sarah stopped at a coffee kiosk near the security checkpoint. The barista, a young man with a nose ring, smiled at her. "Morning. What can I get started for you?" "Just a black coffee, please," Sarah said. "Coming right up. You work for the FAA?" he asked, nodding at her badge. "I do," she replied. "Cool. You guys really cleaned house around here lately. My cousin works the ramp. Says the new managers actually listen when they report busted equipment now." "That's the goal," Sarah said, tapping her card to pay. "Safety starts with listening." She took her coffee and walked toward the security checkpoint. The TSA officers were efficient, firm, but polite. The barking dog's approach of the past had been dialed back. It was the Mitchell effect, a ripple of accountability that had started with a torn passport and spread through the entire airport ecosystem. She cleared security and made her way down Concourse K. Her heart did a small involuntary flutter as she approached Gate K-12. It was inevitable. The body remembers trauma even when the mind has processed it. The gate area was crowded. A flight to Miami was boarding. Sarah stood back near a pillar, just observing. It was an old habit, one she would never break. The podium at K-12 had been physically redesigned. The high, fortress-like counter that Kyle Vane had loomed over was gone. In its place was a modern open-concept station. The agents stood at waist-high terminals that encouraged eye-to-eye contact rather than a top-down glare. And there, standing at the center of the storm, was Jessica. The transformation was striking. Gone was the terrified junior agent who had trembled while her boss committed a felony. In her place stood a woman who radiated competence. Her uniform was pressed, her scarf tied in a neat professional knot. But more importantly, she wore a pin on her lapel that read, "Lead Agent/Care Team." Jessica was handling a situation that a year ago would have resulted in a screaming match. An elderly man, clearly confused and slightly agitated, was blocking the boarding lane. He was fumbling with a phone that seemed to be frozen. "It says my pass is here." The man stammered, his hands shaking. "My daughter sent it." Passengers behind him were shifting their weight, the precursor to grumbling. Jessica didn't sigh. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't look at the line to share a look of annoyance. She stepped out from behind the podium. "It's okay, sir," Jessica said, her voice cutting through the noise with a calm, melodic quality. "Technology likes to freeze up when we're in a hurry, doesn't it? Let's take a look together." She gently guided him a few feet to the side, clearing the lane for others, while not making him feel banished. She looked at his phone. "Ah, I see. The brightness is just turned all the way down. May I?" She adjusted the setting. The QR code popped up. "There we go. You're in seat 4A. That's a great seat. You'll be the first one off in Miami." The man's shoulders dropped 3 inches. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I was worried I'd miss it." "Not on my watch," Jessica smiled. "Have a great flight." As the man boarded, Jessica turned back to the podium and caught sight of Sarah standing by the pillar. Jessica froze for a split second, then a genuine warm smile broke across her face. She held up a finger to her colleague to cover the boarding scans and walked over to Sarah. "Inspector Mitchell," Jessica said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm. "I heard you might be passing through today." "It's good to see you, Jessica," Sarah said, taking her hand. "And please, it's Sarah. You're not under investigation today." Jessica laughed, a sound of relief. "That's good to know. Though honestly, we're ready if you were. We passed our internal audit with a 98% score last week." "I saw that report," Sarah said. "That's why I'm flying Aerosky today. I don't fly airlines that score under 90. We learned the hard way," Jessica said, her expression sobering. "But we learned. The new training, the Mitchell Protocol, it's intense. Role-playing, bias, detection, de-escalation. A lot of the old guard couldn't handle it. They quit." "Good," Sarah said simply. "If you can't handle treating people with respect, you shouldn't be in customer service." "We miss you around here, though," Jessica added. "In a weird way. You scared the hell out of us, but you woke us up." "I didn't do it to scare you," Sarah said softly. "I did it because every person who walks up to that counter is trusting you with their life, not just their schedule. Their life. You are the first line of defense." "I know that now," Jessica said. She glanced at the board. "We're about to close the door. Are you on the 10:30 to DC?" "I am," Sarah said. "Gate K14, Jessica said. "I checked the system. You're in 3A. But I put a note in for the crew to make sure you get the good coffee." "Thank you, Jessica," Sarah said. "Keep up the good work." Sarah turned and walked toward Gate K14. As she moved through the terminal, the hustle of the airport continued around her. Families running business, people typing the endless dance of humanity in transit. But something caught her eye near the entrance to the food court bathrooms. A yellow "Caution Wet Floor" sign was set up. Behind it, a man was mopping the terrazzo floor. He wore a grey generic jumpsuit, the uniform of the contracted cleaning service that Aerosky used for the terminal's common areas. It was ill-fitting, stained with bleach spots. The man moved with a heavy lethargic rhythm, pushing the mop back and forth as if each stroke cost him $1. He stopped to wring out the mop, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a gloved hand. He looked up, his gaze drifting across the passing crowd, hungry for recognition, but terrified of it at the same time. It was Kyle Vane. The year had not been kind to him. His blonde hair, once gelled into an aggressive fin, was now limp and thinning, hidden under a cheap baseball cap. His face was puffy, the jawline that he used to clench in performative authority, now slack with exhaustion. He wasn't just working a lower job. He was haunting the scene of his own demise. Sarah slowed her pace. She didn't stop, but she watched him. Kyle looked up and saw her. For a moment, the noise of the terminal seemed to drop away. They were locked in a silent exchange that spanned the 20 feet between them. In Kyle's eyes, Sarah saw a kaleidoscope of emotions. There was shame, thick and suffocating. There was anger, the lingering, resentful ember of a man who still believed deep down that he was the victim of a system that had turned on him. But mostly, there was the crushing reality of irreversible consequence. He looked at Sarah's blazer, her badge, the way she held her head high. Then he looked down at his mop bucket, filled with grey, soapy water. He had been the king of Gate K-12. He had held people's vacations, weddings, and funerals in his hands, and he had crushed them for sport. Now he was cleaning up the footprints of the people he used to terrorize. He opened his mouth slightly, perhaps to speak, perhaps to apologize, or maybe just to curse her one last time. But no sound came out. He realized with a final devastating clarity that he no longer had a voice in this world. He had revoked his own access. Sarah didn't scoff. She didn't smile in triumph. She felt a profound, distant pity. It was the pity one feels for a structure that collapsed because it had no foundation. She gave him a single, barely perceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. I see you, and I see that justice has been served. Kyle looked away, unable to hold her gaze. He plunged the mop back into the bucket, the water splashing onto his boots. Sarah turned her eyes forward. She walked to gate K-14. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Mitchell," the gate agent said, scanning her boarding pass. "Thank you for your service with the FAA." "Thank you," Sarah said. She walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her heels clicking on the metal floor echoing like a gavel. She found her seat, 3AA window seat on the left side. She settled in, placing her bag under the seat in front of her. She reached into her purse and pulled out her passport. It was her new one, issued 6 months ago. The cover was stiff, the gold foil pristine. She opened it. The photo was clear. The laminate was smooth, unblemished by the violence of an angry man. She ran her thumb over the data page. It was just paper and plastic and a microchip. But it was also a promise. A promise that she was a citizen, that she had rights, and that she could move freely through the world. The plane pushed back from the gate. Sarah looked out the window. She saw the ramp workers guiding the aircraft, their orange wands glowing against the grey tarmac. She saw the baggage carts, and in the distance, through the terminal window, she saw a small grey figure pushing a mop bucket slowly down the hall. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful crescendo that vibrated through the cabin. The pilot came over the intercom. "Flight attendants prepare for departure." Sarah closed her passport and tucked it safely into her inside pocket, right next to her heart. The plane taxied to the runway, turned and surged forward. Within seconds they were airborne, lifting over the snow, over the terminal, over the past. Sarah Mitchell watched the ground fall away. She took a deep breath, opened her laptop, and began to type the opening lines of her speech. "For DC, true authority is not about the power to destroy," she wrote. "It is about the strength to protect." The plane banked left, piercing the cloud layer, and rose into the blinding, beautiful sun. This story is a brutal reminder that authority is a privilege, not a weapon. Kyle Vane thought his uniform gave him the right to belittle Sarah Mitchell, but he forgot the most important rule of power. There is always someone bigger, and there is always a price for arrogance. Sarah didn't just win a lawsuit. She changed an entire industry and stripped a bully of the one thing he valued most, his status. It serves as a warning to everyone in customer service and a beacon of hope for every passenger who has ever been mistreated. Dignity is non-negotiable. If this story got your blood boiling and your justice bone tingling, please hit that like button. It helps the algorithm share this lesson with more people. Have you ever dealt with a power-tripping official like Kyle? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more stories where karma hits back with nuclear force, make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. You don't want to miss the next flight. Safe travels, everyone.